This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God. Bowling. Is bowling a sport? I had a heated debate about that. I know it's an ESPN, but it doesn't make it automatically a sport because they even do World Series of Poker, and that isn't a sport. I say bowling is not doing the activity. It isn't a sport. It's not a sport. Now, Robert Putnam, who's a sociologist, he studied bowling, but not to figure out whether it was a sport or not, but because it was somewhat of a measuring stick of the American society. He saw that in the last half of the 20th century, that more people were bowling, but they were bowling alone. They weren't joining leagues. They were just doing it on their own. And he saw this as a loss of social capital. It's a big sociological word, but basically it means that the community was breaking down. Breaking down. People were bowling alone. People were eating alone. 43% less family dinners. Living alone. Now all this aloneness was creating sadness and depression. Sickness. And many people have already shown this. There's a connection between health and being connected. And of course, it's natural because you and I, we are created to be in community. We are social creatures. And we're social creatures because we are spiritual creatures. We want to belong. And when we don't have it, it affects our health. So there was a study done where actually Robert Putnam was said, if you just join one group next year, that will double your increase your rate of surviving the next year by 2 times. Just joining a group. Another study showed that if you have a heart attack and you have a surgery, the people who are alone, not married or divorced, they're 2 times more likely to die post-cardiac surgery recovery than those people who are married. So if you're married, marriage might give you a heart attack, but it will help you survive it afterwards. Being together. It's what we are created for because we're social creatures and we are spiritual creatures. And so when there's a community, we want to join it. And that's what we see in today's reading, the early church. You read it, right? It's a very powerful community. And it's a small community. And actually, it was judged as a heresy. But yet, people risk rejection from their families and friends to join this community because in it, they saw joy, they saw strength, and they felt like they belonged. So what did they do well? How is it that this was such a good community? Now, they do a lot of things well. But today, I just want to look at one thing that's probably the most important thing they did. And we know this because they keep repeating it over and over again if you read it. They said, it keeps saying that they broke bread together and they ate meals together. It's like 3 times they ate together. First thing they did, the most important thing they did was they broke bread together. And of course, it's natural, right? When you make a meal, people tend to gather together. If you make good meals, more people gather. If you make fried chicken or pulled pork, I'm there. They love to eat, and they ate well and regularly. Now I want to break this down. Why is breaking bread, why is having a meal together so important to community? There was a 15-year study done of families who eat together and who don't eat together. And they saw that families who eat together, they have a lower rate of depression, teenage pregnancy, and substance abuse, and a higher grade point average than those families who don't eat together. Right? So you don't have to waste money on after-school programs. Just eat well together. Why is eating together so important? Well, first, it's because of this. Eating together is a physical activity. See, you could talk over the phone. You could even share pictures and what you're feeling online, but you can't eat together online. Eating together is a physical activity. A food, physical thing is there, and you have to come together close and face to face, and it causes physical interaction. For you see, we human beings, if we want to have authentic genuine connection, it can't happen virtually. It's got to be physical because we are physical beings. We have this body. There's no way to short-circuit this. The only way to genuine community is by physical, face-to-face interaction. Without it, there's no community. So there have been a lot of studies about Facebook. One study was done by University of Michigan where they studied for 2 weeks about Facebook users. And their finding was surprising. They found that the more a person uses Facebook, the less happy they were. But it wasn't just Facebook, actually. It was actually in a lot of any online connections. In 1999, there was a study done in Carnegie Mellon where they showed that people who spend more time online tend to be more depressed. Why is this? Well, it's because we are substituting virtual online connection for physical connection as if it is enough to simply post and to like and to comment. As if it's enough if I could just talk over the phone without face-to-face interaction. We can't have community without a face-to-face connection. Brené Brown, she believes that the way to wholeness is vulnerability. And she argues that sharing all these things on your Facebook post about how you're feeling emotionally is not genuine vulnerability because there is no real risk. When you post it, there's no risk of the person not understanding you or rejecting you. You don't know what the other person is doing while they're looking at your post and liking. For all we know, that person could be just going through the post and saying, like. It's only when that person is face to face and when I tell the story and I could see what his facial gestures is, then I know if I'm being affirmed or being rejected. Only in that risk is there genuine vulnerability, and only through that vulnerability is genuine wholeness. Now, I've kind of laid down a whole lot of data about Facebook. This is not against Facebook, okay? It's not about deleting Facebook account, but it's to show that, Facebook is one thing. It's a good tool, but it cannot replace our physical interaction. Because we human beings, the only way we're going to connect is just by being face to face. And the irony of this, just one more Facebook thing is this. You know this, right? When you gather on the table, most of the time now, people are not face to face. Where is their face at? At the Facebook. The Facebook is limiting face to face interaction. We're sharing everything to the world, but not to the person in front of us. Breaking bread means we are physically sharing this meal, and that means we're forced to face. And only in the face-to-face interaction can there be a genuine relationship. Daniel Brennan, he's a great, brilliant international pianist, and he created this orchestra, West Eastern Divan Orchestra. And in this orchestra, he brought in Israeli musicians, Palestinian musicians, and other Arab nations. And they brought them together to simply play music together and to spend some time together. Now, he doesn't have any grandiose fantasy that by bringing these people, that certainly in the Middle East there's going to be peace all over. He doesn't believe that, but he believes that if he can just create a community where people just spend some time together, face-to-face, then their prejudices and the lies behind it will slowly dissipate, and they will see that they have a lot more common than they really thought. That not just they have two eyes and one nose and one mouth just like me, but they have similar emotional response to suffering. And if I could create a community where you can see what the media says is enemies and they could be friends, then it at least gives hope for peace. Like his violinist. His violinist is a Palestinian. His name is Tamal, and he found him when he was young. And let me share with you what he says about his experience. Coming to this orchestra is probably one of the hardest things that each one of us has done. It's not easy to come and face, these are his words, this violinist, time, so much pain and suffering and come face to face with the people who you grew up thinking that they caused it. But the only way we can achieve anything that is even remotely related to peace is if we sit together and talk, or if we at least try to. not a great conflict resolution steps, programs. Just come, just be together and just be face to face. The early church had a powerful community because they ate together, and eating together meant they came face to face. Now here's the thing about eating together though. Are you done with eating if you do it once? No, right? We have to eat every day. In fact, we have to eat 3 times a day. In fact, some of us eat more than 3 times a day. Anybody? More than 3 times? No, don't raise your hands. We have to constantly eat. And to say we're eating together means that every time we eat a meal, that we come back, no matter what had happened in between, that we come back and we spend time over and over and over again. Again, that's why it's a repetition. Right? In Acts 2, they ate together. At the homes, they did the Lord's Supper, they shared meal. You eat it 3 times a day. 3 times a day, you see the same face over and over again and over and over again. I know that sometimes could be stressing, but it's that coming to the table over and over again that actually deepens relationship. Here's the thing though. See, quality doesn't come on its own. Quality only comes through quantity. You can't have quality time. Right? You meet your son first time, right? Maybe you've been absent and say, hey, let's spend some quality time together. The son is not going to give you any quality. It's only after hours and hours and hours of quantity, then the quality comes. That quantity is important. So just coming together on a regular basis. Eating together is a physical interaction. Eating together is a continual, repeated coming together face to face. And that was a bond of this community. They came together repeatedly, no matter what happened in between. Roy Etienne Smith, he's a pastor. And his church was growing, and he felt that God wanted the church to buy a church building. And so he gave it to the prayer request of the congregation. God is going to provide us a building, and he went looking for a loan, and he couldn't get it. He was getting desperate, but he kept saying, keep praying, keep praying, keep praying. And then one mortgage consultant came to him and said, I'm going to help you get the building. And he thought this was the answer from God. He said, oh, right. And then he just took the paper, didn't read it, just signed it all. And he got the building. And they started school. And 1 year later, he got a phone call from the FBI. You're a wanted man for fraud. What? It turned out the mortgage consultant, he cooked the books. But it was his name in all the papers, so he was going to be held liable. So he went on trial. Now he thought it's going to be okay. He really thought that the judge would understand. So he even made dinner plans after the sentencing. But the judge looked at him and said, I'm sorry, Pastor. I have to make an example out of you. 15 months in federal prison. And he felt like he got life sentence. The pastor going to prison? He said, don't worry, God has a plan. But he really said out of cliche. He's like, what is happening here? He didn't know what to expect. He even packed a duffel bag and went into prison. And the guard said, no, you're not bringing any duffel bag. This is a prison, not a hotel. And he was in the holding block, and they were processing the paper. And then he was just going through this and just feeling terrible. He remembered the only person in his family who went into federal prison, and it was his dad. And he only saw his dad once in his lifetime because his dad left him when he was a baby, when he was 7 years old, just once. And his mom told him about his dad, how terrible he was, how he beat her, how he sold drugs, and how he got caught. He's in prison now. I don't want you to have anything to do with this man. So growing up, he hated him. In fact, his whole life was committed to not being like his dad, so he graduated from college. Not like his dad, so he became a pastor. But now he's going back to prison like his dad. And he thought, this is karma. This is like generational sin. What is happening here? And then the warden came and told him his cellie, that's prison term, right? Cellmate. And he looked at the name, and it was a double take because of the name of his dad. Well, it turned out it wasn't just the name of his dad. It was his dad. And now anger was boiling up. Like, all right, what am I going to do? I'm going to be stuck with him. I'm going to let him have it. And all these issues and questions that I have. But as you walk, and there's not even 1 feet away, when he saw him, it all melted. It wasn't affectionate or like that. He's like, good afternoon, Mr. Milton. And then they got together, and for about a few weeks, they treated each other like cellmates. They talked about, Mr. Milton talked about, where to go and what guards to avoid and what nurses to go to, what nurses to avoid, and things that cellmates talk about. But slowly, as they were spending time together, things began to thaw. Like there was one time when Mr. Milton took out a folder, and in the folder was all the clippings of everything that Roy did. His contest that he won, his graduation, even the obituary of his mom. Moving him. There was one time when, no matter what, right, if you're in that closed space 24/7, you'll know each other. So he was trying to read, and Mr. Milton, still calling Mr. Milton, was trying to sleep. He said, don't worry about it, Mr. Milton. I just want to read this book just a few more hours. But Mr. Milton, as if it was his dad, go to sleep now, son. And this upset him. He stood up and said, Mr. Milton, and he started, I have some questions for you too. I started asking about why that, why this, and his Mr. Milton would never confess to anything. He would just say, possibly. It seems so. But again, slowly, there was one time when this Mr. Milton said, your mom was a good woman, and I wasn't good for her. Now, the reason why I stayed away was because I didn't want you to end up here like me. But now that you're here and talking, and there was one morning when he wouldn't wake up. He wouldn't get out of his bed. And the PA said, Mr. Milton, and he had to come for his medicine. And so Roy was trying to wake him up. But he wouldn't go. And Roy would not have his dad pass away, not under his watch. So he said, Dad, you need to go now. And when he said it, it just came out. It wasn't planned. It just came out. And from that day on, it would go back and forth. Mr. Milton, Dad. Mr. Milton, Dad. Dad, Dad. The first Christmas he spent with his dad was in prison. The first birthday he spent with his dad was in prison. And when he was finally released, it was bittersweet. Happy to go back to his family, but they don't want to leave his dad. They were so attached that when they were leaving, they couldn't even say goodbye. Now, whenever they call, his dad will always end their phone conversation with, I love you, my son. I love you too, Dad. In the interview, just a fun story, true story, and he says, I thought it would take years to work this out. But I guess it happened so fast because we were together for 24/7. How do you build a community? Not with good, perfect people, because there ain't anyone like that. It's people who say, okay, I'm coming back to the table every day, every Sunday, every life group. I'm coming back to the table. No matter how I feel, I'm coming back. And you deepen, and you deepen, and you deepen that relationship. Eating together, breaking bread, it's a physical activity. Breaking bread means you do it repeatedly. But there's one more thing that's more unique about this community than other communities. It is this: when they broke bread together, they did it as communion or the Lord's Supper. You see, everything they did was in one sense done by other communities. Other communities did where they got together and they studied their teaching. They shared meals, yes, they ate together. They shared their possessions, yes. But the thing is with them, whenever they got together, they remembered Jesus Christ. And that was very unique. Every meal, they'll remember Christ. Because that's what Christ has commanded of them. It's called communion. We'll be having a little bit later. In Matthew 26, here we see Jesus' own words. Jesus says, as they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, take this and eat it, for this is my body. And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. See, every time they ate together, uniquely, they always remember Jesus Christ. And they remember that Jesus Christ was broken for them to rebuild this community. They realized that the community was not built because of their kindness or leadership, of their goal or their vision or of their smart. They realized that it took the sacrifice of Christ to make this community happen. It was because Christ was broken that their relationship with God was restored. And because their relationship with God was restored, their relationship with each other was restored. And they believed this. So they believed the community was founded upon the sacrifice of Christ. So you even have this passage in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 13 to 14. But now, you have been united with Christ Jesus. Once you were far away from God, but now you have been brought near to Him through the blood of Christ. For Christ Himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles, blacks and whites and yellows, the rich and the poor, the one with the home, the one without the home, the have and the have-nots, all of them into one people when, in His own body on the cross, He broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. So the Christian community knew that the ground of the community was Christ alone. And Christ made the ultimate sacrifice. And so community is always possible. Restoration is always possible. Renewal is always possible because it wasn't about them and what they brought and what they did, because it was always Christ, and Christ did everything when His body was broken. When you think about it, every community needs a sacrifice. Every community needs a sacrifice. Ernest Gordon tells a story about the miracle at River Kwai. It was in World War II. So at a POW camp, Japanese soldiers had these Scottish soldiers. And it was a barbarous time. They mistreated them so badly that even the Scottish prisoners, they were mean to each other. And there was one day when there was a first shovel checkpoint. And this shovel checkpoint, one shovel was missing. And that Japanese captain, he took out his pistol and said, "What happened to the shovel? What happened to the shovel?" And all the Scottish prisoners, they're looking at each other, no one. And he presses the pistol to the temple of the closest Scottish soldier and says, if someone does not show up with the shovel, I will shoot you down one by one. That's when this Scottish prisoner, no one knows his name, steps up and says, "I did it." The Japanese captain puts his pistol back into his holster, takes the shovel nearest him, and beats him to lifeless flesh. The prisoners are shot. They take the body to bury him. The second checkpoint, they go there and they count the shovel. And it turns out that the first checkpoint had a miscount. And the word spreads that an innocent man sacrificed his life. And things start changing. The prisoners, they begin to treat each other better. When the Allies finally come and they liberate these prisoners look at the enemies, the Japanese guards, and says, "No more. No more war. No more brutality. Just peace." Sacrifice creates community. Sacrifice makes enemies into brothers. Every community needs a sacrifice. Do you remember the movie, Remember the Titans? And today, NFL first week, but you guys are here. God bless you for the sacrifice. Your team will win. I don't know about that. Okay. Remember the Titans. It's a movie based upon T. Williams High School. And they hire their first black coach, Herman Moon. And he was to replace Bill Yost, who was a winning coach, and he was about to be inducted to the Hall of Fame of high school coaches. And it's very racially tense. So when the white players find out what's happening, they go to the retiring coach, Yost, and say, "Oh, we're not going to play. We're going to boycott." When Yost hears this, he realizes he has to do something. And so this former head coach agrees to become an assistant coach, a defensive coordinator. A huge sacrifice. And in that movie, and it's based on a true story, They win game after game after game. Coach Boone is threatened that if you lose one game, you'll be fired. But the team keeps winning game after game after game. There's one state finals, and one of the state board members, the owner of the school, calls in Yost, says, look, we really appreciate what you're doing, but I want you to lose just one game, and your induction to Hall of Fame will be guaranteed. So they wanted Boone to get fired, even at the losing of their own high school team. Yost nodded. And when the game began, he gave his heart out to make sure that they win. He lost the induction. He won the game. Every community requires a sacrifice. And that is what the community is all about. For on the night that Christ was betrayed, he came and he broke the bread. He said, this is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he poured wine. And said, this is my blood poured out for you for the forgiveness of your sins. This evening, I invite you to this table to break bread together. It does not matter what you've gone through and where you are up to this point. For Christ was broken for all of your sins, all of your shame. And in this table and around this table, every relationship can be renewed. So tonight, come and receive it. If you follow Christ and you believe in Him, then you're all welcome. This is not just for Presbyterian Church. If you have never received Christ, but you want to receive Him today, then come, receive His body and receive Him as your Lord. We'll receive our communion as you come down the middle aisle, and you take a piece and you will dip it in a wine, and you are welcome to pray more at the altar or go back to your seats and to continue to pray to Christ before you partake it. So let us receive our communion. Our praise team will come first down the middle aisle. Elders, please come forward.